We're going to talk about some external stakeholders now.
Right. Okay. So when we look at the kind of the expanded ecosystem for VA, we want to start with essentially what is the board of directors for the department. And so we'll talk about legislative oversight and what's referred to as the committees of jurisdiction over VA. By the way, there's two types of committees. There's authorizers and appropriators. Appropriators give you the dough, and authorizers tell you where to go. And we're going to just focus on the authorizers today. In the Senate, it's the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, otherwise known as SVAC. And there are two primary members. There's a committee of about, I think it's 16 members, but the two primary members really are the chairman, in this case Chairman Tester of Montana, and then the ranking member, which is of the other party, in this case Senator Moran of Kansas. Now, what's important to remember is that while the Senate doesn't have subcommittees, all its work is really done at the full committee level, and their work really is largely focused on the major policy and programmatic issues of the agencies. The other thing they do is they confirm all of the president's appointees, the political appointees, the PASs, if you will, that come into the agency. Flipping over to the other side of the hill, literally, we have the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. And again, this is really on the authorizers. And HVAC really does have, as the name is known, HVAC does have not only the full committee, chaired by Chairman Takano of California. The ranking member is Chairman Bost of, ranking member Bost of Illinois. But unlike the Senate, the House does have subcommittees, and most of the work is done within the subcommittees. The one we want to highlight here is the Subcommittee on Technology Modernization. Chairman Mervan from Indiana is the chairman, and then the ranking member is Representative Rosendale from Montana. So we see a lot of focus on the major programs that have those technology components. We've mentioned them previously, and then certainly all of the enterprise aspects really do get overseen by the House Committee.
2 points I'd like to offer here. Number one is that our industry partners, they should know who their representatives in Congress are and how they relate to the House Veteran Affairs and the Senate as well. And whether it's direct or indirect, it's very important to understand those stakeholders and how they help represent your interests from, a local perspective, from a corporate perspective.
Well, and certainly the members of these committees and their staff, who are crucial to the members' point of view, they're obviously overwhelmed with a lot of issues. They're also increasingly dependent on industry partners coming to the Hill and educating and making them aware of kind of what's best practices and the latest, greatest in industry. I know I've seen increasingly more and more C-suite and government affairs folks from our industry partners on the Hill advocating for best of breed solutions. So again, very, very important.
The other point too is I think you'll all see when you see the testimony and you see how the committees operate, a very strong bipartisan flavor here. They are interested in veterans outcomes, what's good for veterans, and that's not a partisan issue. So it's refreshing, frankly, to see this operate. Everybody is in this for the veterans, from the staff to the members themselves. It really is an outstanding job they do, I think, on behalf of our veterans.
And I think that one of the issues that folks are finding out is the increased importance of our industry partners in providing the either staff augmentation or services, because as we know, there's an extreme shortage of IT and security, workforce within the U.S. It's only going to become more challenging again, as every agency and every corporate entity has more increasing demands on technology, and there'll be a workforce that really struggles to keep up and provision and maintain that.
Amen.
Lastly, we want to talk about the major veteran service organizations, and there's a lot of them out there. There's over 100 that are recognized nationally. These are referred to as VSOs again. And there's really three things that the VSOs do, and they play an incredibly important role. By the way, you will see them on panels. There'll be a second or a third panel for, especially in the House, sometimes even in the Senate, where they will come in and provide a point of view and public advocacy. So three things things they really do is, first off, they really help the veterans, the new active duty, departing active duty men and women that are transitioning from active duty or reserve status into veteran status. And just a public service announcement for all of our industry partners, anyone here is, if you are a new veteran and you are filing a claim with the VA, know that the VA really wants you to have help, right? They want you, and you shouldn't have to pay for it, right? And these veteran service organizations, most of them will provide pro bono assistance in terms of filing your claim. So get with them and their veteran service reps to do that. Secondarily, we talked about it, each of these VSOs have a public advocacy role. Recent examples, certainly the VSOs weighed in a lot on the Blue Water Navy benefits. They're starting to weigh in on toxic exposure. So again, you'll see them up on the Hill. You'll see them engaging with the agency. They're very committed and very engaged. And then finally, and probably not the least, is really at the local level, right? All veterans issues ultimately come down to those local facilities and programs. And in this regard, the VSOs do a great job of being that local hub, that connector for veterans to come together. The so what for our industry partners and others on here is just be aware of the role of VSOs, understand the issues that they're involved in, and then for you as industry partners, as you hire veterans, these young women and men, and maybe not so young women and men that retire, how can you help in their transition and support them as they come into your workforce?
Exactly right.
Okay, we want to talk and get back a little bit to strategic plans and process again. So if you remember earlier on, we talked about the agency strategic plan. We mentioned that the current one, it is being updated, but it's essentially a holdover from the previous administration. We expect the update for the agency plan sometime later this year or early 2023. But what you probably also don't know is that OMB requires that the Chief Information Officer, otherwise known as sometimes in some agencies as Information Resource Management, has a companion strategic plan that nests within that and shows how those IT dollars are going to support the agency plan. And then certainly part of that too is an enterprise roadmap which more deliberately spells out how that plan will be implemented across the entirety of whatever the Office of CIO is for whichever agency, in this case the VA. The so what for industry partners here is just to be aware of these elements, these plans, and again, how you are tying your products and services, your support in terms of RFIs or responding to proposals, and tying and kind of connecting to those values. Below that, in terms of an enterprise roadmap, is at VA, and Bill touched on this earlier, is the digital transformation strategy, otherwise known as the 4-5-6 framework. So the 4 guiding principles, the 5 imperatives or goals, and the 6 focus areas. We just want to touch on a few of them here today, but I think you heard, certainly from LaWanda, of these goals, strategic sourcing and working with industry partners is a key part of that to ensure that the customer experience mandates are met. Certainly the VA has been a leader on cloud. We see that down in one of the focus areas, and with the great work of the Enterprise Cloud Solution Office and that team and the VA Enterprise Cloud. And Bill, I know that was something that you started under your tenure, but then also we see also cybersecurity becoming prevalent too, especially around the executive order over the past year and the mandates around zero trust.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that really good setup for the next chart. So we're going to take this one step deeper. We're going to go through these 5 goals. And what you'll see in each one of these slides is the goal on the upper left, the future state on the bottom right. This is available online, so you can go and get it. But the points I'm trying to do is connect the dots to the industry partners and what this should mean to them. So we'll just take a look at goal number 1 here, which is the exceptional customer experience. And this one is implemented, frankly, through upfront UX and CX research and expressed in use cases. You see that the customer experience was recently announced by the president in executive order, and so that's meaningful in and of itself. But it's also meaningful in terms of how that experience actually flows down through an acquisition. So if you start at the beginning with the customer research experience, and then you build that into a use case that's meaningful for a VA gap that needs to be filled, then ultimately that will get changed into what they call a Viper, a request, and then it gets changed into an acquisition, and then that gets changed into a contract. So the first domino to fall is that customer experience and that research that you need to do to actually make that veterans outcomes better, for them and for the people who are using those tools. The next chart I'll get into is IT modernization, as this is really crucial obviously for the future of IT. And in this case, the future state aligns resources according to the products, focus on outcomes for veterans through proactive engagement with business partners being VHA, VBA, and NCA. But that modernization will fail unless the infrastructure is continually refreshed, whether it's hardware or software. VA has a lot of equipment that is past end of service life due to a capital expenditure approach, or what we say CapEx approach to acquisitions. Let's buy the equipment, put it in, but as soon as that goes in, you have a maintenance and a refresh obligation. But in many cases, there are higher priority issues, COVID, hurricane, that come down the path and say, well, we can go one more year with this equipment or one more year with this unrefreshed software. And pretty soon that one more year becomes too late and this past end of service life. And then this rubber band that you've stretched has to snap back. And now you're in a world of hurt because you have to fill that budget gap with more money than you really had. So there's a keep it up and running obligation that you have, and that's one of the reasons why we push for OpEx, because that way the burden of risk and refresh goes to the contractor and is serviced through service level agreements that the contractor has to maintain.
One of the differentiators that's made this even more possible and more transparent, one of the perspectives we talked about earlier, is having a technology business management framework and having a real-time tool with cost towers and cost pools that allows the agency and allows industry partners to see the almost near real-time spend, certainly in the cloud environment.
That's right. So it's important for us to be able to allocate cost by customer. How much of this IT is allocatable to VHA or to VBA interests and needs, or NCA or HR or legal or OIG or Office of Management. So by allocating those costs through a technology business management tool, then you can start saying, well, here's how much money we spent on your behalf last year, and back it up with real data. So it's very, very important.
Well, it's interesting too, because I've even had some conversations recently with some former and current GAO folks around scoring for those systems and real-time IT cost estimates around legislation. So we saw it firsthand with Mission Act, right, Bill? I mean, $9 billion to VHA, and the amount of money that was given to OIT was $33 million, essentially statistically zero. The real costs ended up being over $400 million. Mm-hmm. So doing that better cost estimation at the time of legislation to understand hardware, software, all categories of management, so that the right investments can be made and IT does not lag the business.
Exactly right. We're going to talk a little bit here about strategic sourcing. We had a great interview earlier with Luanda Jones, and we talked about her roles, and she was very, very helpful in explaining, the different pieces and parts and how they all fit together. So it was really a great interview. But I'd just like to foot stomp one point that she made. I think one of the important parts of her organization that doesn't get as much attention as I think it should is one of category management. So the idea here is that if you have 15 licenses of software X in Vision 1 and 100 licenses of software X in Vision 15 and 1,000 in Vision 3, one of the jobs that the Office of Strategic Sourcing has is to consolidate those, so that now the VA can, number one, know what they own or what they're subscribing to, and then consolidate those subscriptions, so economies of scale, and allow a lower cost per license to be applied by virtue of that knowledge and that information.
I love the fact, too, on software that with our modern IT service management tools now, we're able to see if I give Bill James a license and I see you don't use it in 90 days, you probably don't need it. And I can harvest that license and give it to a user without imposing additional cost.
And the other important part of that is, in many cases, we have providers, doctors, who come into the VA and then they will leave and then they will come back. Well, while they are not in VA, those licenses can be harvested and applied to other folks who are, employed and working day by day, right?
Just another example, I know as you and I toured around the field and met with our workforce, we said technology is disrupting every industry, certainly healthcare, financial services, benefits, memorial affairs. It's also disrupting us, but it's disrupting us in a positive way in many examples.
Yeah. The other part of the strategic sourcing that LaWanda mentioned was the IT vendor management office, and that is in the front door. It's not a blocker; it's a coordinator. So a job of that office is to deduplicate visits. So you don't want Company X coming in 3 places in one day. By coordinating with the IT vendor management office, that they can make sure that they're being fair with regard to industry engagement, such that they can spread it around properly and fairly to all the vendors who want to come in and help VA with its market research. Now, Jim, we've talked about the Office of Strategic Sourcing, goal number 3. We're going to drop down to goal number 4. Which is IT workforce transformation. As you know, workforce is one of the President Management Agenda items, priority items. I think it's number 1 on the list, and it's just as important to OIT. Secretary McDonough has recently given some speeches about the workforce, and obviously the import that the workforce has in VA and obviously in serving veterans' needs. What it means in terms of transformation is that we're not going to transform individuals, but we do want to transform the skill sets, the inventory of skill sets in the IT workforce. So what that means is if we need 100 hours more of Java skill set, then the VA can offer courses and work that allow employees that want to get those skills to go and get those skills and fill the gap that is sitting in our workforce skill inventory. To our IT industry partners, that may not mean much, but it is significant to them, because it's been estimated that only about 15% of the IT workforce in OIT have an IT degree of some type. That doesn't mean they aren't knowledgeable of what you're talking about, but you can't assume that. So when our industry partners are building a use case for a specific IT solution, whether it's hardware or software, they can't come in and say, well, and speak geek. They have to describe the use case, what it means to the veteran, what are the outcomes, how that aligns with the strategic plans and everything that we've talked about, the 4, 5, 6, and then describe that in English in a way that a PM can understand what we're trying to achieve. So an industry partner's obligation is to inform and educate every time they have a meeting, a market research meeting, for example, with someone in the VA.
Bill, how critical do you think it is, and of course this is a bit of a biased question on my part, that it's 2022, how much do line of business partners have to be more conversant in technology too? It doesn't mean we overwhelm them with IT speak, but how much do they need to understand in terms of delivery and just basic technology principles?
I think they absolutely do. I think I think it's growing, whether we force it to or not.
Yeah.
But I absolutely agree that we have a very powerful, very intelligent workforce in VA, and I think it's important that they also pay attention to the IT part of their daily mission as well.
Right.
Next goal we're going to go to quickly is goal number 5, which is seamless and secure interoperability. The interesting thing about this goal is that in days past, it was primarily focused on the interoperability between the health record in VA and the health record in DoD. That was primarily the topic that took the oxygen out of the tent. But since then, as we've talked earlier, there are a lot of other interoperability interface issues, specifically Dr. Tibbetts' Office of Technical Integration, and how he worries about the interfaces within VA and and between VA and external organizations as well. When you think about 1,000 applications in the VA system inventory, there's an n² potential number of interfaces. That's over 1 million possible interfaces, point to point between each one of these software applications. So that's a daunting task. Making that task easier is the Lighthouse program, APIs, Application Programming Interface, with the Lighthouse program that was built primarily in the product engineering organization under Drew Michaelgard. So by using APIs, that's a modern way of doing interfaces, and that mitigates this burden, this 1,000 times 1,000 point-to-point interface burden that can consume all of your development sustainment budget.
Bill, I remember I loved your metaphor, having grown up in the house of an electrician. My father was an electrician, and helping him being kind of his wire monkey growing up is the whole notion of API is like having that 110 outlet versus just having a box with a bunch of wires. Vista's that way, right? It's that spaghetti bowl where you expose it and there's this infinite number, like you said, n² of connections, whereas the API strategy programs and puts those outlets in the wall so that vendors and commercial solutions can integrate and access VA and vice versa.
Right. And so these external vendors who want to build a software application to plug into that API or that plug in the VA wall securely, by the way, that unleashes the power of the private sector to help our veterans, right? So it's no longer just VA money. You say, hey, here's the interface. We're going to rely on you and your innovation and your capital to build an application that can plug into that interface to benefit veterans.
Right. Well, and they're always going to do it better and faster than the government does anyway.
That's right.
All right, Bill. Well, thanks for walking us through those goals. We want to come back now to the enterprise roadmap and talk about some of the major programs. As mentioned before, the OIT really is catching those presidential management agenda items, the agency priority goals, and then figuring out how we tie the roadmap and support that. As most of you know, these are business and mission systems, right? And again, we talked about the importance of technology, and not only technologists, 2210's IT specialists having the right skill sets, but also our line of business partners, right? You can't, again, the water's warm, come on, and you just can't throw your hands up in the air and say, I don't understand. Everyone needs to be able to understand what the requirements are, the role that technology plays, and how we're going to work with industry partners and internally to do this. Also, I think the important thing to remember is that this roadmap is used as budget justification. I know that ITRM and the staff down there, they write that for OMB every year to say, hey, here are the requirements, here's how we're going to support them, and then here's the multi-year plan to get us there. When we look at this busy slide here too, kind of the so what is that a lot going on in supply chain, and I know Bill's going to talk about some of the major modernization, major programs here next. But when we look at, for example, the Defense Medical Logistics Standard System, which is an Army program borrowed from DoD, and really how VA manages its supply chain and asset management. I know in IT there's real-time asset management and service management tools, but the same is needed on the physical inventory side as well. A lot of challenges within the offices, certainly within the VA Logistics Redesign Office. And the one thing, and I know I was out at James A. Lovell Federal Healthcare Center where where DIMLS was piloted in VA, And what the OIG report found that more than 40% of those high priority and essential business requirements were unmet. And I saw that on the ground, right? It was a challenge, right, in terms of that communications, in terms of business process reengineering, in terms of change management, a lot of things that maybe we could have done a little better to make sure that first go around on DIMLs was a more successful launch. The successor system over in DoD, which is Logical, the cloud-based version of that, has also got some early questions. So stay tuned for more on that on supply chain. Bill, over to you for the rest of the programs.
Thank you. We're going to walk through the rest of the major programs. As we mentioned, there's about 1,000 applications in the software inventory. We couldn't spend our time talking about it, but the reason we brought these up is because they're reflective, I think, of the way VA does its governance, prioritizes programs, and they tee up, I think, a tremendous opportunity for industry partners. So I think these are meaningful. The one we're talking about right now is the most often known as FMBT, sometimes also known as IFAMS, which stands for the Integrated Financial and Acquisition Management System. So FMBT, IFAMS. Little known fact is, if it wasn't for Cerner and the Electronic Health Record Modernization Program, this program, FMBT, would be the largest program in the VA software inventory. FMBT IFAMS is a cloud-based system, was launched in 2016 as a shared service project with the Department of Agriculture, and it uses Momentum, a product called Momentum, a financial management system which is being developed by CGI. It's being rolled out across VA in phases. It was previously implemented in NCA and for their budget and finance operations in 2020. Now it's being rolled out across VBA. Full implementation may take as long till 2030, and of course the big bump in that road is implementing it out across VHA. I see this as a potential lead system integrator opportunity. It's well known that the government does not do very well as its own lead system integrator. There are special skill sets and systems that help agencies accomplish that mission. So I think that there's a potential lead system integrator opportunity down the road for FMBT IFAMS. The next large program that I'll talk about right here is the HR program. This one also goes underneath the radar screen, I think, more than it deserves to. Our HR folks in VA have done a great job of putting HR Smart together, which is a system of record today. At the bottom of that application is the Oracle PeopleSoft product, but there are lots of stacks of applications on top of that to interface out to a constellation of feeder systems. The idea here is that you can see some of the transformation initiatives in the future environment, but I think most helpful would be when they add the manager and employee self-service capabilities and the manpower so that we can actually count billets like they do in the DoD. That's something I think that supervisors like me are looking forward to, and I think will really turn the corner on how supervisors and managers use the HR system. Once again, this is known by various different names. There has been RFIs out on the street recently. A lot of folks have responded to those RFIs, but I view this as another potential lead system integrator opportunity. The next chart is electronic health record modernization. We've spoken a lot about this already. This has been widely publicized. Congress is focusing on it. GAO, the IG, and of course we recently had a reorganization in the Office of Electronic Health Record Modernization. As I noted, this program does not report to the CIO, but reports instead up to the Deputy Secretary. The EHR platform that Cerner has is called Millennium. It's a COTS system. It's not a system that VA is developing. I think a lot of people think that VA coders or contractors are developing this system like they are developing other applications. Not true. Now, it is true that changes are being made in the product to accommodate VA's special needs and unique needs, but the risk and the activities are happening in a contractor's software development organization. not inside a VA development organization.
You know, it's interesting, similar to the ongoing debate in DoD has the last B-52 pilot been born yet? The question is, has the last mumps coder been born yet, right? I think the more serious comment is there's a lot of Vista and that Christmas tree, right, as you said in the past, that is really more ERP and not ERM, and it's not going to be decommissioned. It's going to have to find a home.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Vista will, at least pieces of Vista will live on, and in lots of different ways. And Vista is well loved, but I think those pieces and parts that will remain will be those, not necessarily the core EHRM, but will be one of the many constellation health systems that surround the core EHRM. OIT's primary responsibility in EHRM, frankly, is to get the infrastructure in place so that when the COTS product Millennium does arrive, that it can plug in. So it can have the right fiber in the walls, the right Wi-Fi, the right screens. And that's one of the functions that Dr. Tibbetts kind of accepts those requirements from the OHRM, make sure that our solution delivery, our engineering, and our deployment teams are putting the pieces and parts necessary for a COTS Cerner Millennium product to actually nest inside an infrastructure at a medical center.
Well, you know, and there's been some recent discussion about this again, and I just have to kind of set the record straight, right, is what the team did with the DevSecOps release framework around all those capability areas within OIT, all the way from the current state review at Spokane, main grant staff, 18 months out until the actual go live in October of 20. There were no problems that were attributed to IT infrastructure or engineering.
Right. Now, it's not to say that there aren't challenges, but I think the challenges that are being faced here are workflow and change management challenges, in addition to some technology challenges. But that all adds up to another potential lead system integrator opportunity that I think people should look for, at least consider in terms of white papers, our industry partners in the coming months.
Well, because this is the difference, right? While there is PMO support and a PMO contract within VA, unlike DoD and DHA, there is not a lead SI, and I think we have indications that change may be coming.
I think so.
Yeah.
And finally, the last, I think, major program or IT infrastructure, that being technical debt. We've talked about the need for IT modernization, and of course hardware and software are the heart of that. And many industry partners, when they talk about technical debt, they're thinking about Wi-Fi routers, computers, storage devices that go past end of life. And clearly that's a big part of it. But it also includes software. Every single line of software that gets written today is a line of software that's going to have to be maintained next year and the year following and the year following that. So it builds up it piles on and builds up this layer after layer after layer of future requirements for sustainment. Downstream, what that does, if you have a flat budget and a buildup of sustainment, that squeezes out the ability to apply what's left of that budget to technology modernization, software modernization, workforce modernization, skills enhancement. So just remember that everything you do today in-house is an obligation to maintain that in future years.
Well, I know as I departed the role, the Enterprise Program Management Office did an Encompass study on what were the current needs around software modernization, and the number was over $2 billion.
Wow. Right,
in terms of deferred maintenance. A large part of that, again, is because even as new systems come on, old systems are not decommissioned, or it's deferred maintenance, as Bill said, in terms of we have the new capability with the new system, but we only have enough to do the O&M and maintain the current system. It's a little bit of a Hobson's choice. Bill, also, you've kind of touched on it before, too, is we know with more and more software as a service that we're going to see those costs shift to vendors, and smart industry partners are finding ways now to take those applications out into their environments, their commercial clouds, and just provide the as a service. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and the neat thing about as a service is that VA is not the only provider or the only maintainer. So you can amortize the costs of an enhancement or a maintenance over a large population of subscribers and customers, as opposed to one subscriber, one customer called VA.
Right.
And so what that does is it lowers costs for the VA, and it shifts a burden of risk and the burden of performance over to a contractor who has a commercial incentive to be the best.
Right.
And of course, they either improve or they die from a commercial market perspective. Whereas the government is a monopoly, does not have those very same incentives.
Well, the agency is going to have to realize too that from an investment standpoint, if you're going to get to that true CapEx environment, it has to be more consistent year-over-year investing. It can't be these peaks and troughs that we have. I mean, from an OpEx perspective, excuse me, correcting myself here, the OpEx is going to require that levelized, consistent
Exactly
investment.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.